Hey, good evening to you. Mark Sept with HurricaneTrack.com here. Going to take a look at the latest on Hurricane Dorian. I am in New Smyrna Beach at the condo of one of our supporters. Really appreciate this Mark, Mr. Mark H. We will call him just to make sure. I don't want you to use my last name. He's from Orlando, and very nice of him to let us. That's funny. He was just texting me just now. Let us use this condo. Myself, Brent, and Tony are here from North Carolina. Brent, of course, from the Virgin Islands. So, latest on Dorian. I'm going to make the camera part go away here because, again, something's weird with my software and it'll like lock up all my tools. I'll come back towards the end. Let's bend this down a little bit and say my goodbyes, so to speak, my sign off. So, the first thing to look at is the track map. Not much change, which is good for several reasons. We're not seeing any drastic changes to the west over here that would indicate a landfall in Florida. Boy, what a change from what it looked like, just a few days ago, that it might come up here out of the Puerto Rico area and come across and maybe go into the Gulf Coast states. We are not seeing anything remotely resembling that right now, and I'll explain why in just a moment. However, any deviation, and we'll talk about this in the discussion, from this track to the left, if it came along the left side of the cone of uncertainty here, that pretty much parallels the Florida coastline, then much more impactful impacts would be felt in Florida. So you see the hurricane warning area, that is the red. I'll outline it in yellow there. The Bahamas still being impacted severely, of course. Now, Hurricane Watch posted from, basically the Florida-Georgia border all the way up here to the North Carolina-South Carolina border. And that puts into motion a whole lot of stuff from the government, local government, state government, federal government, you name it. And this has just been so painfully slow and unfolding. I get it. We were talking about it here in our little planning meeting, myself, Tony, and Brent, that, what are we going to do over the next several days? What's our plan? Maybe we should just go up to Nova Scotia. We'll wait for it up here in Halifax or Newfoundland somewhere. When you have all this equipment and all this talent, you want to be able to put it to use if you have to. We're not rooting for hurricanes because they're terrible what they do to people. But the excitement is to be able to say, oh, wow, there's a hurricane coming. Well, guess what? I've got all this amazing equipment that we can study that hurricane with. Well, if there's not going to be a hurricane, then tell me. That's the way we look at it. And so trying to plan is really interesting because it parallels what you guys are trying to do. You are trying to plan for your lives and, your evacuation, your business, your school, and it's very stressful. So just wanted you to know that, myself, Brent, and Tony, we get you. We empathize with what you're going through. And I live here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And, my wife is asking me, when do we need to be thinking about leaving? We have kids, little kids, pets, whatever. We got to deal with the hurricanes just like everybody else that lives along the coast. So my heart is in it. I feel what y'all are feeling. So this is a look at the track map. This is a look at the watches and warnings. Now, let's look at the public advisory. A few interesting nuggets of information in here. I don't want to say tidbits because that's Levi's branding. And we're not going to steal Levi's branding. We'll call it Mark's Nuggets. Oh, wow, that's terrible. Chicken nuggets. Think of chicken nuggets. But whatever. Hey, you get on the road. I've been dealing with this since Puerto Rico. And Dorian owes me one here for going all the way down there and then avoided Puerto Rico. Maybe I am what's keeping it away. So I'm bringing the area good luck because I certainly brought Puerto Rico some pretty good luck. And Brent left the Virgin Islands to go to Puerto Rico, and look what happened. Just bizarre. Anyhow, back on task. Stationary, that's important. Pressure's way up, and the winds are down to 145. Now, all of this is absolutely good news, because of where it is now. And all the stuff we've seen coming out of the Bahamas, the Northwest Bahamas, is just, wow, a whole new level of frightening. But this is not necessarily good news depending on how close it gets to the coast now. because a weaker storm is expanding. The energy is spreading out. That energy is going into the ocean, and water levels are going to start to rise, and we're going to see some storm surge problems. So we'll address that as we move down here to the hazards affecting land. Still, obviously wind issues, etc., storm surge in the Bahamas, still terrible. And then we get into the states here, Florida and beyond. Now we're talking from Lantana, Florida, to the South Santee River up in South Carolina, 4 to 7 feet. North of Deerfield Beach to Lantana, 2 to 4 feet. Now, where is that exactly? I realized I haven't showed you this, and not everybody knows their geography. So let's go back over to the home page of the Hurricane Center, and storm surge watch warning. There we go. Yes, I understand. Thank you very much. So the storm surge warning is this darker pink color that I will bookend with these marks here. All right. So Lantana, just a tiny area of storm surge watch there. This area, and I'll highlight it in yellow now to make it stand out, that is your storm surge warning area. And that's a lot of coastline that could potentially see 4 to 7 feet of storm surge inundation above ground level. And I talked about this earlier. If you're in your house, I'll just flip it around and call it, say to you, you're in your car and you had 4 feet of water rise around you, that'd be pretty frightening. If it's 7 feet of water, unless you're driving a monster truck, it's lethal. Well, 4 feet could be lethal, honestly. So that's nothing to take lightly, 4 to 7 feet above ground level. And for people that live along the coast down here, they know if they are vulnerable to storm surge, they should anyway. And this extends up to the South Santee River, that 4 to 7 feet deal. So all of this is storm surge watch warning, but all of this area I'm highlighting in yellow could see 4 to 7 feet, and it's not going to surprise me to see that number go higher into double digits at some point. As much as I know about storm surge, that's my gut feeling. Out of the discussion, this is what I want to point out the most here from forecaster Brown. Dan Brown down there, Daniel Brown. So Dorian has become nearly stationary, with the 2 most recent aircraft fixes showing essentially no motion. A slow westward to west-northwestward motion should resume tonight into early Tuesday, with the eye and devastating winds only slowly pulling away from Grand Bahama Island. By Tuesday afternoon, Dorian should begin its much-anticipated northwestern turn as a weakness becomes more pronounced in the subtropical ridge. Although the center of Dorian is forecast to move near but parallel to the Florida coast, the east coast, only a small deviation of the track towards the west would bring the core of the hurricane on shore. We've been over this a lot. Miles are going to matter. A broad mid-latitude trough should help to turn Dorian northeastward by Wednesday night, and the track models show the center coming precariously close to the southeastern United States coast. The tracks from the 12 UTC runs of the global models have remained fairly stable, which has resulted in little overall change to the latest NHC track forecast. So this part is good because the confidence is starting to build, and then users of this product are reminded that the hurricane is not a point. And I talk about this a lot, that life-threatening storm surge and hurricane force winds will extend far out from the center. Now look at that. That is a satellite image, a series of them, in this loop here from the Weather Nerds site, weathernerds.org. And that hurricane has definitely gotten larger. Look at the size of that eye. I mean, wow. Let me use the white color here to highlight things. Not moving much, and it's going to wobble around. Might look like it went off a little bit more to the northeast or whatever. It's just wobbling. Generally speaking, it looks like it's going to bend back to the northwest and then eventually north, and then it makes that turn, and where that happens is obviously very critical. So when people say, oh, it's not supposed to hit Florida, or I heard from Joe, who follows so-and-so on Facebook, that it's turning north. and we don't have to worry about it. Whatever. Any hurricane where people are saying it, I know that they think they know what they're asking. Where do you think it's going to go? And I want to ask them, and I don't want to sound like an a-hole, but I'm like, what do you mean by it? I mean, really, people, if they don't deal with hurricanes like I have for my career here, they say, where do you think it's going to go? Are you asking about this it? Is that the it you're talking about? The core, the center, the eye? Or are you asking me, where is this going to go? You got the outer fringes too, but that, in this case, is the it that we're talking about. That is where all the damaging conditions are. Obviously, the closer towards this center you get, the more damaging those impacts become. So when we reference this as it's not forecast to make landfall, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to wait and see where it goes. Are you waiting for that? Is that the it? Or should you be talking about this right here? And that's the correct answer. That whole thing moving up the coast, if it gets close enough, strong onshore flow, storm surge, power outages, trees down, and that can impact you severely. So please continue to take this seriously. Flipping it around from, wow, it's weakened 45 miles an hour off where it was yesterday. While that's great, if you said, oh, there's a 140 mile per hour hurricane, is that what it is? I have completely lost my, I want to make sure. What's the wind speed? Come on. I think it said 140, right? 145, okay, even better in terms of my analogy here, my example. If there's a 145 mile per hour hurricane that came up from 120 today, the 11 o'clock advisory, if it was 120 and now it's 145, people would be flipping out, right? I'm not asking you to flip out. That's never a good solution, but I'm asking you to remain on guard, and please be sensible about this. Be careful if you're out there along the ocean with all the swells, and that includes you folks all the way up into the Carolinas. Just a real quick mention in terms of the track map here. There is the possibility of some interaction with Dorian up here into New England and the Canadian Maritimes. We don't want to ignore this area up here, but we will deal with that as we go. Obviously, the North Carolina Outer Banks, both the southern Outer Banks, the Crystal Coast, and Hatteras, Ocracoke, Kitty Hawk, etc., Southeast Virginia even. Just look at where the cone of uncertainty is. It's all through here, days 4 and 5. We do have other features to watch out over the tropics, absolutely. All of these have a decent chance at becoming tropical depressions, and there's more coming off Africa. And in today's episode of I Told You So, and it's not because I'm some genius that knows something that nobody else doesn't, so I'm not going to be that arrogant about it. I rely on other people to help me. I talk about Ben Knoll, I talk about Eric Webb, and others that tell me things either directly or through their social media posts. Tyler Stanfield, over at OU, and more. Levi talks about it. The pattern in August was for hurricanes until late August. What happened? The lid came off, Dorian started it, and now it's possible that while Dorian is up here, whatever it ends up being, that we will Dorian will be joined in a party with other tropical cyclones to be named later. And we were only going to be in early September. We have a long way to go this hurricane season. And I told you so by virtue of information that we've all been looking at if you have been following my videos. Now, some of you have just found me recently, so I can't say, well, you should have been following. But yes, we have been talking about this. This is no surprise. It's right on cue and right in line with what the forecasts were, especially from NOAA and others. Okay, so just bringing that up. Not so much to beat my chest about it that I'm some visionary. We just look at the clues and the modeling, and it was suggesting this uptick. So there you go. So back to this. I want to show you something interesting here. So there's Dorian spinning along, and here is a map that Tony is a degreed meteorologist. He and I were going over this with Brent, and he pointed out some very interesting things. So this is the steering level for a hurricane that's in this range here, 940 to 949 millibars. You can clearly see Dorian there. High pressure sitting out over the Atlantic. High pressure is sitting out over the nation's midsection. Let's use the yellow highlighter. And Dorian is stuck in between, squeezed in there. And then you see the trough right there coming in, and that creates this weakness. If these high pressure areas were linked like this solidly, and there was no break right here, Miami would be suffering from a cataclysmic hurricane today. Almost certain of it. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, somewhere. But they're not bridged. They're not solid, and it didn't get steered west-northwest or due west into Miami because of this weakness that came down and eroded the western side of this ridge. And that's what saved Florida so far from the big cataclysm that came roaring through the Bahamas. Conversely, this trough, the weakness between these ridges here, is why the Bahamas have suffered for so long. And that's the truth. So as this evolves, this should build in a little bit more as this energy lifts out, and then you wait for this next piece of energy to dig in. Everything's changing and fluid. So Dorian will move off to the northwest a little bit and then eventually turn. And when that turn happens, how close to the Carolinas, North Florida, and Georgia too, will determine the impacts. And each day, we will go over this and dissect it. All right? I'll be talking about it. Mike Watkins will help me with this. And, of course, you have the rest of social media and your local TV weather folks, the meteorologists there. Real quick, give you an update on our plans. I'm down here in New Smyrna Beach. Let's use better color. And we do have a camera set up in Marineland, that area. I have populated it into our app. And I don't want you to buy the app, believe it or not, because it's not stable right now. But if you have our app, you already know what it's called. And I'm not going to pitch something that doesn't work reliably. And so the cameras are going to be there. But the app sometimes opens and sometimes it doesn't. I can't explain why. I don't know. It's just a bug. And it's like, I'm worried about it, but I'm not too worried about it. Okay? Because it's out of my control. And but if you do have our app, you already know what it is. Check the cams, and we have one up right now, and we will add more. I don't know exactly where those are going to be because it's all dependent upon Dorian. Our plan is to add a couple of more somewhere here in Florida, north of the Cape, probably. I'm almost certain I'm going to put one in Charleston Harbor. I'm pretty sure I'm going to put something down in Brunswick, Georgia, right along the interstate. Probably something in Murrells Inlet, something in Carolina Beach, maybe something up here along the Crystal Coast. I doubt I'll do anything in New Bern this time. We'll see. Definitely going to have one in Rodanthe, and maybe, if I can get there in time, something in Ocracoke. That's my plan. Weather stations, working on that as well. Might put one up here where we are in New Smyrna on the South Causeway Bridge like I did for Matthew. That would be kind of cool, so I can at least have some wind data. When does all this happen? Between now and the next 24 hours for Florida. This is the Florida part of the project. And that's a good documentary, by the way, on Amazon Prime. It's called The Florida Project. Has nothing to do with hurricanes, but that just made me think of that. The rest of it, stay tuned. I don't know when we will be dealing with this area yet. If I did, I'd tell you. This is so unstraightforward, it's making me go gray. That's for sure. Dorian making me gray. Isn't there a book, the story of the painting, the picture of Dorian Gray or something like that? I can't remember because I'm friggin' tired and stressed. And I'm just the guy tracking the hurricanes. You guys live here and you're having to deal with it too. So there you go. We will continue to update pretty much everything. I put some stuff on Twitter, but there's so much on there, and you know who to follow. And I try to put stuff on there when it's relevant, but I'm mostly posting here on Patreon because it's all encapsulated. It's all a great aggregate. I can post stuff there. Most of it's public. And then for our crowdfunding folks that are helping us out with funding, I give them access to the exclusive content. And I'm telling you what, it's working great. The compliments I'm getting from people, I really appreciate it. And the funding is going up, and we're going to be able to do a lot with that. Remember, I told you, we got a lot of hurricane season to go. Any one of these, especially out here, that end up in our backyard, this funding will help towards that. So I thank you very much. You can check it out at patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. All right, so that's it for now. I'll probably do another video around 11 o'clock tonight. Michael Watkins is going to post something later as well. I'll put that on Patreon. And remember, you don't have to be a crowdfunder to view most of our posts on Patreon. You go there, you see what I've posted. It's a lot like Twitter and Facebook kind of rolled up into one. I love it. Anyhow, that's it. I'm done. Tony and Brent and I talk a little more. Go check out a couple of possible cam locations with a few people that we have met through social media around here, and we'll keep seeing what happens, all right? Have a good evening. Hang in there from Florida all the way up to the Canadian Maritimes. I know you're watching this. I'm watching it there with you. I'm with you in heart, mind, and soul. Mark Sept with HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks as always for tuning in. You know what? Before I go, let me just pull this back up because I like saying hi. There we go. I don't like talking at you. I like talking to you. So let me do that the outro. You have an intro and an outro. Let me do the outro again. Thank you for tuning in. I am Mark Sept with HurricaneTrack.com. It's great to have you watching from whatever device you happen to be doing so from. I'll post another video for you late this evening.